I would like to introduce on Dauphinais.
Morning.
And why don't we start off, and if you want to, Mike, get an extra mic right there for you.
Morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Our intent was to have Representative Lanou and Senator Summers together, but neither one could make it. Brian last minute this morning called sick and he wanted me to cancel, but I thought I would come anyway. We will be having another one scheduled. I'll look at my calendar and let you know. It will be here in the town hall. It'll be from, I think, 7 to 8:30. I will get you that date. Look at my phone on my calendar, but hopefully they'll all three be here because we're all on different committees. We all are, there's a lot of information packed up there. I invited Kevin to join us because I thought maybe he could give a perspective of how some of the legislation impacts your town directly. It was a very interesting session, very different than we've done before. We had all committee meetings on Zoom. So some of them we had a couple of 24-hour meetings, which has been unheard of except for the medical choice issue. That was a very big hot issue in the past several terms that I've been up there, but that in the past has been the longest one. But we had planning and zoning meetings that went for 24 hours. This year was a very different year, I think, because people were able to get on Zoom. Maybe they were taking advantage of participating when they may not have been able to get to Hartford. So I didn't have any planned agenda. I'm glad that our good first selectman did a major issue for you so that you can kind of have a guide. But I will say that bills are complicated. Oftentimes they have a title that's very obscure, very vague, and they're loaded with information that is in the bill. Once you listen to floor debates, you get a lot more information, so I will help you as much as I can. The Senate has a different debate than the House does, so we all try to put that information together, but I'll do the best I can, and if you have any particular questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
One more thing for everybody. I know that we had a follow-up date you list. I believe it's the 27th. When we confirm that, we can talk about the time, obviously right here again. But I'll put that out to the same sites that we placed it out before so everybody knows what's available. I think there was actually two that you were thinking of, but I know that I believe the 27th might have been it.
Okay.
In any event, we'll try to get all of the participants here for that event, and so you can ask other questions if you like. So you all have a copy of that pamphlet. I guess I would ask if anybody has any questions for Ann, and anything that might be related to the town I can answer, hopefully. But if you have any questions or concerns, now's the time to start.
Marianne?
Question, Ann, regarding the cannabis bill. State law conflicts with federal law as far as this goes. What is going on at the state level to address that?
So Marianne's question is specific to the cannabis bill, which, quote unquote, again, we're talking about words and a play on words and what they mean to us in the state, making cannabis legal. Cannabis is federally illegal. We cannot make it legal. So if you were to be walking down the street participating in cannabis and a federal agent could arrest you, it is federally illegal. That's a whole nother debate. They are still talking about making it nationally legal. I don't know how quickly that will happen. But that's again, when we talk about the play on words, it's really not legal.
Yeah.
Connecticut has just decided that they're not going to enforce any laws against it except for the 300 pages of enforcement that they have in the bill. And that's complicated, and I honestly haven't even read through all of it yet, and even the parts that I have are very obscure. It's very complex. It became a kind of if you will, a legislator's nightmare trying to understand what was in it and how that was going to play out for our towns. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did, but if I could ask a follow-up, when do we have any idea when the commission will be created to write the guidelines?
I understood that was going to be sooner rather than later. I don't even, they are probably working on that as we speak to put together that commission. Because even when that commission's put together, they're predicting a year to a year and a half to get things, if you will, up and running and processed.
For people to understand, it's a 15-member board, which is going to be talking about what rules and regulations they will come up with. What I thought was interesting about it, if you take a look at page 10 of 30, it talks about recreation cannabis, and then they talk about how much they'll be taking in for revenue before they really start addressing issues concerning the actual legalization. So you can tell where their priorities are. It's more of revenue. And we just spoke about this a little while ago. We have an issue where now that this is something for enforcement, we have to talk about what the issues are for the police, our local police. How do they enforce? How do they follow up? Just so you know, we do have a dog which was trained for multiple sniff. If you take a sniff of the person or the vehicle, and you get a hit for cannabis and or other drugs, well, that's what they were trained in. Now that they were trained in that, though, they have to retire, and we have to have another dog who is only trained with everything except for cannabis. So that's another nightmare we have to walk through. So this is for a town to be able to relate that to what goes on with the town. Of course, we're going to wait for a final outcome from what a commission is going to come forth with, what their rules and regulations are. I have to think the next step of that is, what if a business wants to open up for just growth and distribution and sales? So there's a lot of things that still have to be answered.
Thank you, Kevin, and that is exactly why I thought it was helpful to have Kevin join, because he can bring the perspective of how bills impact you in your town. And he just pointed out something that probably other towns don't have to contend with. It's specific to here with the dogs sniffing and being trained for that. I wasn't even aware of that. Another thing that they're doing is they're allowing towns to choose how they want to handle individuals using marijuana. So for example, you could decide in your town that you want to just allow people to participate in cannabis at the park or at wherever, whatever property that you just designate, and you could say that all other property you cannot participate in cannabis in public property. So that's another issue that the towns will choose how they let that happen and play out in their town. Frank?
For Kevin, on this topic, does the federal government have any jurisdiction in Plainfield? Go ahead.
If there's a federal agent in Plainfield and they're looking and doing a search on something they consider they've been following for a while, I believe they do.
So it would have to be under the auspice of a warrant?
Yes.
Okay. They can't just come down here to the Commons and round up.
And they wouldn't do that. What they would do is they would actually work in cooperation with our local police force to say this is what they're following on.
Okay.
So
thank you.
And just to add, to the fact that, the idea is that Connecticut has made it legal. Well, it's not legal. It's federally illegal. But it really wasn't a freedom bill that I would have liked to have seen it be. There were several representatives that co-signed another bill that took away the 300 pages, and it was a 5-page bill. This bill has been made completely about revenue, completely about winners and losers and who gets to do, participate and who doesn't. In my opinion, this was just a complete racketeering bill. There are so many flaws. I mean, even to the point of a police officer in your town, if he pulled over a car and there were young kids in it, 16, 17 years old, that were driving, and he pulled up and they were obviously smoking marijuana, he's not allowed to do anything. He can't take any action, so they literally are in their car and they proceed to leave. So it kind of tied the hands of police when that happens to address matters like that. There's so many things in it. It's just a packed bill with, and admittedly, they said there were many, many problems with the bill, but they wanted to get it passed anyway. I voted no. I'm not a legislator that votes on a bill when I see problems that need to be fixed before we pass it. There was no reason to rush it. We could have taken more time. This has been up on the platter for the last, I think, 3 or 4 sessions that I've been there, so it's not new. They've been talking about this a while. It is fraught with problems, and I'm very concerned about how that'll play out for the state.
I'm sorry to harp on the cannabis bill when there's so much more that we could talk about. But I thought that though the bill was passed, it would still be, people were not allowed to drive and smoke, and passengers in vehicles were not allowed to smoke. So it seems to me that
That's true.
an officer could take action against that.
Well, there's a lot of things going on in the state with regard to crimes. Like, I know you've heard about the stealing of vehicles across the state. There's so many things that are going on that really the police's hands have been tied. They've let up on the laws. We had the blue slate law, we can get into that afterwards. I mean, the clean slate law, excuse me, that wiped away a criminal's record. There's many, many laws that passed this year that actually either decriminalized or less criminalized or kind of tied the hands of the police to take action on a lot of these things. And I know that some of these debates on the floor are long and laborious, but when you listen to the detail of the questions asked, and when they talked about pulling over a vehicle and how that would play out, clearly the police, again, their hands are tied in what action they can take. You're right, it is illegal. There's a lot of things that are illegal, but we've made it so difficult to address them with regard to the law that it's concerning. Frank, I know you had a question.
Yeah, Frank or Plainfield. I was curious on the note of if it does become enforceable for law enforcement, will they have a way of measuring how much marijuana is in someone's system, say if someone's baked or half-baked?
So that was another concern for individuals in the past who have been very reluctant to pass the bill, was that there is currently no test to determine even how recent you've actually smoked or taken cannabis. It can be in your bloodstream, from what I understand, for 30 days or more. So you could be pulled over and then tested, blood tested, but that's complicated too. There were a lot of really things that needed to be ironed out in the bill that just weren't addressed. So we'll see how that plays out again to be determined.
On the note of the federal employers like General Dynamics, defense contractors for the United States Navy, you cannot show up to work with any of that in your system. So as far as that goes, employers will have the right to terminate.
Right, and I think, to your point too about it being federally legal, you're working for federal business, and they're going to address that in the way that they see fit.
Yep.
I'm sorry, was there a question over here?
Just one more add-on I wanted to put in. I think this would have been a better bill had they not addressed individual issues other than establishing the 15-person board, coming up with the rules and regulations, and giving them a 2-year window to do that. Then doing the implementer to say, here's what the rules will be. Instead, as you look at it and you can read through it, it's basically talking about how much revenue you're looking at versus the laws, and that's the backwards look that I see in this.
That's a really good point. It kind of goes to the bill that I put in with several other legislators to take the Connecticut prohibition off of cannabis for individuals 21 and older in the state of Connecticut. It didn't get into all of that minutia, which is a point well taken. That's how it could have played out, but it didn't. We're even confused. In some parts of the bill, it talks about how many residents you have to have in your town to actually have a setup to sell marijuana. So we're not even sure. I was just talking to some of the attorneys the other day, and there's much question about what the language actually means. Some people believe it means you have to have a town that has 25,000, a population of 25,000 and more to be able to sell it. Others say, no, if you have less than 25,000, you can only have one business. And for those that have more than 25,000, you could perhaps have more. So there's a lot of ambiguity in the bill. We're not really sure how that's going to play out. Any more cannabis questions?
We don't, I know, and we don't even want to talk about the nightmare that that creates for local zoning regulations. Where do you stand, Ann, on the clean slate?
The clean slate bill, I voted no. If you looked at some of the crimes that were going to be eliminated, it was concerning. It's concerning that someone can commit a crime, a serious crime, and then it's like it never existed. So for me, it's a complicated bill too, but there's many, many things laid out in that bill that were argued on the floor that you could, again, specifically listen to, that were very concerning, some even regarding crimes with children. And these individuals, it would be like they never committed the crime. Obviously, young kids do things, and you don't want that following them for the rest of their lives. People make mistakes. I mean, I'm not saying that's where I'm at, but the bill itself went way too far, in my opinion, and I voted no.
And I believe what you're talking about is on page 9. It is the criminal justice and public safety area. It says criminal record erasure. And you can judge for yourself what may or may not work. Some of those things are definitely questionable.
So we had one of the attorneys, Legislator Fishbein, who's an attorney who deals with a lot of this in court every day, and he really laid it out what exactly that was going to mean for the residents of Connecticut. And coincided with that, he talked about these car thefts and some of these things that are going on with kids. So now not only are we going to have consequences for many of these crimes, in addition to we're going to be erasing crimes. So what are we doing? What are we doing to our state? And the crimes are on the rise. In particular, maybe not over here, but I did have a chance to speak to some of the local police. I was at the bike rally the other day, which, by the way, you guys did an amazing job. It was an amazing event. I was so impressed with how many people turned out. But I spoke to some of the local police who I asked them, are you seeing an increase in crime? And they said that, the attitude from the youth is, you can't do anything about it. And so that attitude is really, really running rampant with the kids. It's concerning. It's concerning to the police. If you speak to the police, they're concerned. I think we live in a rural area, so you don't see as much of it here, but you move more towards like Bridgeport, Hartford, New Haven, and it's a big problem. Big problem.
I had a question on the governor's emergency powers vote. There was bipartisan opposition to that, and it went ahead and passed. I was curious, is there an appeal, or is there any kind of legislative action that can be taken to?
So the only thing that can happen with that is it could be a veto by the governor, and I'm not quite confident that the governor's going to veto the law that he wanted. Yeah, that was there
like
was
a censure or something, some kind of something for the record saying that most of Connecticut is against this.
And I think you're right. At least what I hear from people is they believe that the legislature, the representatives that you vote for, need to go and be accountable and to vote on these execution of these mandates that are being put in. The argument was made for federal funding, but from what I understand and how it was explained to us, the funding could have still been captured without his continued orders. And his what he actually has is emergency executive order power. He always has the opportunity to do executive orders, but this is emergency executive power. And I think the biggest piece around that was the masks for children in school. There's a huge movement across the state for removing the masks on the children that are attending school. So that was a big piece of that. But yes, it did pass. I think there were 7 or 8 Democrats. All Republicans voted against it. So there was bipartisan support.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks.
Hi, Tammy Miner. When are we taking the mask off the children this fall? Because there's tons of data and studies that are showing that it's very harmful for the kids. But they're saying, oh no, it works.
So that's the governor's, that's his emergency executive order power that he has to continue that. And that was a big impetus around that executive orders continuing. And we don't know. We don't know. That's again why the legislature and the individuals that represent you, senators and representatives, wanted that taken away from him so that we could make that decision and we could debate it and we could vote on it. But we really don't have a say, other than to let them know our constituents don't want it. That's probably the #1 thing I hear right now. People want they want the masks off their children, their school children, and I almost daily hear from somebody, and I did get your message on that too.
So we as constituents, what can we do?
You can call the governor's office. I mean, you know, call the governor's office, call the governor's office, call the governor's office. He's got the power, and they just gave that power to him to continue. And that's why so many of us didn't want him to continue having the power. We're kind of like a one-person rule right now.
And by the way, that goes until, his power goes until September?
I think he got it for 90 more days. So depending on if he extends that, but that takes you right through the start of school. So he can implement that or keep that implemented where children have to wear masks.
So after his powers are over, then it would be up to individual Board of Education.
I believe it would, unless the State Board of Education embraces that and carries through with pushing that down to the towns.
So your question about who do you call would also be your Board of Education. Because the more they hear from residents, from families, to talk about what they would and wouldn't like, they get the message loud and clear as well.
Well, the problem is when you go to the website, their contact information is not there. So it's hard to find their
Go to the
information.
governor's office?
The Board of Education.
Oh.
I can tell you that that's going to be another state board issue. That's how the hands have been tied this year through the governor and through the state board.
I will, yeah, and thank you for pointing that out. There's a lot of boards of eds that are hearing a lot from the parents, but they feel like their hands are tied. There are 6 or 7 towns. The town actually came out with a resolution, and they are not going to follow through with the mask mandate for the children. And they were listed. I can try to find them again. I just saw them. There were 6 or 7 towns, and one as close as East Lyme. Actually, the town councils and the town said, we will not comply. And they weren't going to follow through. So, you know, each town will handle it differently, but perhaps, you know, your town as well. You know, saying, look, we've had enough. We don't want to do this. We don't want you doing this in our schools. I'm not sure what they would do to you, but, you know, oftentimes you're held hostage by funding. That's what happens. Individual towns don't want to do something the state's ordered, and then they hold you hostage by funding. We see that over and over again, so. But be loud. There's a lot of groups that have been loud. I mean, there was almost 7,000 people that showed up for the Freedom for Medical Choice bill, and they were ignored. But you know what I mean? Don't stop, because that's, you know, it's the people. We serve you. You don't serve us, you know, and so we're supposed to protect those freedoms that you have. That's our job. So at some point, you know, maybe some of the people that supported some of these things will not get voted back in, and we can replace them with others that will look at things differently.
So I have one for you.
Uh-oh.
On page 4, it talks about alcohol and the Liquor Control Act changes. While most of these under the Liquor Control Act changes seem to be not too bad, I do have a question on one. And I guess I can relate it to if you go to a package store and you're buying, who knows where after that sale where that alcohol could go. Similar to that would be somebody who is under number 3, where you're permitted to sell off-premise consumption. We're talking about like what they were doing with the packaging and allowed to do a pre-mixed drink with a sealed lid and then sell off-site as part of like a delivery for food.
Yep, that's what that was specific to.
So then we get into the issue of someone places an order for food and alcohol, they go to delivery and the parents aren't at the door. So, again, what's the,
So as I understand it, just like you order wine, you can order wine from some of the wine factories they deliver to your home. There's supposed to be somebody present, and they're not supposed to leave it unless somebody 21 or older accepts it. They just did that with online vaping products. The same thing, they require that somebody be there that's 21 with ID to accept it at their home. I'm assuming that's the same, but that's the first I've gotten asked that.
okay. I'm sure there's other questions or concerns.
I can talk a little bit about the budget. So, you know, we were all told that the budget was a no tax increase budget. It was a balanced budget. What I will tell you is that I had big concerns about this budget. What happened was the federal money that came into the towns supported much of went into the budget. We know this money is going to end. It's not going to keep going. So my big concern with the budget is that we've had a huge expansion on our expenditures in the state. And that when that money is not there in 2 years, we're either going to be making decisions to cut things or we're going to be expanding taxes again. So the budget was a big concern for me. You know, as you know, the implementer and the budget, I think there were 800 pages long, so it's packed with information. So that's a comment on the budget, my concern with the budget. So the youth camp and youth sports comprehensive background check. I voted no on that. I was I think one of the only legislators that voted no on that. So I get a lot of people who ask me about that. So most camps do a background check on the people that work for them. Not an issue, but there's a registry for sex offender registry that's national and state. There's also a DCF registry, so anybody on those lists, anybody who wants to do a background check on their, and people they're hiring can do that. It costs no money. They go on there and they can get those lists of names. For me, it was more bureaucracy and another thing added that businesses have to do and spend money on and wait for. I asked on the House floor, I am ranking member on children, so I wanted to clarify that, and they did. And I knew it. A lot of times, the questions you'll hear on the floor are questions we know, but we want the public to know. So I questioned thoroughly, and I said, you know, what is it that you're going to get from this background check that you wouldn't have gotten by looking at these lists? And basically the answer was no. So I voted no, so if anybody has a question, it was basically adding more regulation. In particular, some of these very small camps that don't have a very big overhead, many of them are running on a dime, volunteers, people helping out. So that was one, I just happened to see that come through. I know Brian is one of the ones that pushed it. He was a big advocate for it. There's actually been no cases in the whole state of Connecticut where there was someone hired, there was a problem with some of the actions they took, and had they done a background check, they would have been identified. Most people that do work, and if they've been brought up on criminal charges, they usually don't go to places to work with children because they know that they're going to be identified. Again, they'd be on the sex registries for both the state and the national, and many of them are on a DCF list as well. So he was basing it off of a case in Texas that happened. Sean?
So this bill is requiring them to do background checks?
Yes.
You're saying they weren't required before, but you don't think it was a good idea to make them required to do it?
That I don't think it was a good idea to make them?
Yeah.
Well, it was an added cost and expense to get
It doesn't
information.
matter, it's children's safety.
I know, but let me finish. It was an added cost and expense to the camps for information they could get freely without doing the background check. Sex offender lists, and I asked the question on the floor, and they...
Were they required to check the sex offender registry list?
Are they required? No, and I had actually asked if we could do that, just require them to do that, and they didn't want to do that. So we've also been having a big problem with fingerprinting. I don't know if you've recently heard, some of the employees can't even get a fingerprinting. That was part of it. So there's a lot of things that go on when we make regulation that complicate things and make it harder. So for these small camps that are running, I've talked to many of them, and most of them do background checks. I just didn't want it to be something that we regulated. I wanted them to make those decisions. My grandchildren go to a lot of the church camps, the small camps they do. They use volunteers, mom and dads. Again, there wasn't any information that was given at the for debate and or my research that showed that it did anything to make anything different except adding a cost to camps.
But the recreational support organizations in town, in the area, have to do background checks. That's not an expense, so you're saying we should just do away with that too?
No, I'm not saying we should change anything, I'm just saying,
Just as a,
okay,
line.
sorry. I just didn't want to support adding more regulation to that, that's all. No, I wasn't trying to take that
I'm
away.
opposed to that stance. I think they should have to do background checks. If the state came up with a way that it could be affordable for them, or free, I'm good with that, but I think they should be required.
And that's,
You're saying you
and
have to spend the night with people you don't know.
And some people made that point. So it's a fair point to make. But again, I think the point that was made on the House floor was that you could get that information without doing that. And I don't think I spoke to one camp, and I spoke to many that weren't already doing those checks. So, but I understand what you're saying. Agreed. Frank, sorry. Oh, sir?
Earlier you said there was a committee of, 12 people on the cannabis?
15.
15 people, I got it wrong.
Yet to be chosen.
Yet to be chosen. Is
Right.
there a salary, or who appoints these people?
I'm not sure how that's going to work.
I believe that that's going to be done by the governor and some of the individuals in the majority party.
And they're
They'll
going
be
to
selecting-
pay these people with state taxpayer money?
On the commission, I'm not sure if that's a lot of the commissions are not paid. A lot of them are. I'm not sure if that's a paid commission. That's a good question. I'm not sure.
I got one more quick one. There's talk of mask mandates again, and possibly shutting the state down again. And I'm totally against it, and everybody I talk to do not want to go back to the mask. It should be voluntary, whether you want to wear a mask or not. I was alive when tuberculosis hit this country, and the only people wearing a mask were the people that had tuberculosis. And I mean, I was small, but I do remember it. Where does the Republican Party stand on wearing the mask, or the General Assembly altogether? Would they back the governor if he automatically says we have to wear masks again?
You know, I can speak. I'll speak for myself. I've not supported mask mandates ever. I believe that that should be a personal choice, so I agree with you. I also have had hundreds, probably, again, one of the two biggest issues that I've had on my plate are medical freedom and the masks, and it's about personal choice. And I've had hundreds of people call me and say, please, let us choose. Let us choose whether we get vaccinated. Let us choose if we wear a mask. Let the businesses choose whether they want to force people to wear a mask to come in or not. And I usually am always on the side of less regulation and not more, less government, not more. So I've always supported those choices for you, and I've been outspoken about that throughout my time in Hartford. I can't speak for the whole Republican Party. There may be some that would agree with that, but I can tell you that I don't. Tammy?
So with the vaccines, they removed the religious exemptions. And I know one of the big concerns was the COVID vaccine and whether it was going to be mandated for children. That question wasn't really answered. It was kind of danced around. And I've also read that Pfizer's and Moderna are looking at combining the COVID vaccine with other vaccines that children have to get. So as a parent, if I don't want my kid to have a COVID vaccine, they can't get the other vaccine. So now they're out of compliance. So what happens then?
So that goes along with the entire mandate that every child must be vaccinated to go to school. So if they add that to the list, that will be part of what they're going to do. We're unsure of how they're going to proceed, but that will be the governor working with the Department of Health. It's my sense that if that's the direction that they want to go, is have everybody get vaccinated, that they are going to add it to the list. And that was a big concern about that bill. And I think you know I've been adamantly against forcing or the coercion of vaccinations for anybody. I believe that's a personal choice. And I know that I can speak for Representative Lanoue and Senator Summers on those. We've all stood strong on that. Marianne?
Question, Ann, about state involvement, for lack of a better term, in the municipal zoning process. Now, understood that municipalities get their zoning power from the state, but it seems to me that this most recent legislation has the state usurping or trying to usurp those zoning powers and take them back at the state level. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'm always about individual freedom and local control, and I will continue to fight for that. The state, right now, the legislature majority that we have in power really support big government ideas, state-run regulation and mandates across the state. And that's what they really, really pushed for. I don't support that. I believe that each town is different. And I think in particular, because we live over here, our state, we don't operate like the towns on the other side of the state.
And we don't have the ability to operate.
And we don't have the ability. We don't have the infrastructure with transportation and so many of those other things that many other big towns. So the legislation that passes oftentimes is made around those big cities, and we fight very hard to remind people that that's not how we work here. We're very, very different, but I always support local control. I believe that our local boards of education should be making their choice on curriculum, what their children are taught, zoning, all of those rules, and I still stand by that. Yes, sir.
I have a question pertaining to the Second Amendment. And the legislature just passed, I believe they passed it, I don't know if it was signed yet, that if my neighbor or my ex-wife makes a complaint about me, they can come in and take my guns and I have no recourse, and I have to fight through the courts to get my weapons back. Could you explain more of that bill? And
where's my Second Amendment people when I need them? Yes, that did come up. And there is every year, every time I go up there, there's another bill to try to tighten up these gun laws. And that did come up. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out. Again, I think that we're putting so much on the police force, and our police forces are weakened because of some of the laws that we passed. Many towns are struggling to get the police, so I don't know how they're going to enforce some of those laws. But yes, they believe that if someone makes a claim, just makes a claim, that they can come and take your guns away and there's no due process. So you have to get an attorney and fight against that. How that will play out in particular, I would have to do a little bit more reading and talk to Representative Doug Dubitzky and Representative Fishbein have been very active. If you have a specific question that I can ask them outside of that, I can certainly do that, but if you give me your contact information, I will get a little bit more detail on that for you.
Well, I could get some of that through Brian also, right?
Yeah, sure. Is Brian your legislator?
Yes.
Your rep? Yeah, he'll do that as well. Anybody else?
What are your thoughts on the 90-minute free phone calls for incarcerated individuals?
I absolutely disagree with that.
I mean, a lot of people cannot afford a phone.
I voted against it. I believe that, when you're in prison, you're serving your time for a crime that you did, and why are the taxpayers paying for phone calls for the prisoners? Think about this. We don't pay for our military men and women who serve for our country for their phone calls to call home. I voted no. Sir?
I just had a quick question about the firearms and cannabis. This is more for Kevin. I just want to see how he feels about that. How do you feel about someone that participates in cannabis and also wants to purchase a firearm. You know, you brought up a very good point. Connecticut's just not enforcing the law. They didn't make it legal.
Would I actually have to talk to our police force about this, because it is very, how would I say this, convoluted, the way that the process is running now. There needs to be some better discussion with the police force before they go out to look to enact and enforce bills. This is not something that I would have thought would have come forward talking about cannabis, and I would have thought this would be taking years to actually discuss and talk about. And to push it like this is not right. It puts a lot of restrictions on what the police can and cannot do. And you're right, talking about then participation in cannabis and going out to purchase a firearm, it doesn't sound right at all. So while I definitely a Second Amendment person, I think that there also has to be some thought behind what they've just done.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. I think that it speaks volumes to so many things that unknowns in the bill. There's just so many unknowns in the bill. Yes, sir.
Well, as being a senior citizen, since the Pettit family was murdered, it's every meeting I usually go to, I usually bring up home invasion and why the state doesn't put more into their thought on sentencing these people with higher penalties to pay. And I was wondering if you would support something like that.
Yeah, good question. So Doc Pettit is a good friend of mine. I'm a nurse, so I actually worked with him before I'm doing this. He sits with me on the House floor, and we chat a lot about those types of things. There's I think it's called the Castle Law that some other states have, where if anybody comes into your home, you can, there's a lot more leeway in terms of you protecting your home and your family. And so, yeah, I would absolutely support the ability to better support ourselves with those kinds of things.
Right now, if someone breaks into my house, I'm alone, and I defend myself, and I shoot this person breaking into my house, I'm liable for murder? And this guy broke into my house to hurt me?
Right now, you have to prove that your life was threatened. It's not enough. You would have to prove that. So they're saying that they would look at the logistics of how far away they were, what kind of weapon they had. So it's not enough that they broke into your home. And I'd argue that anybody who broke into my home was a threat to me and my family. So I am a permitted gun licensed owner, and I occasionally do carry, depending on where I'm going. And I have my guns locked in my home. And if anybody were to come into my home, I have 2 grandchildren that actually live with us. I wouldn't hesitate. I mean, that's what you're in your home and someone's breaking into your home. I would definitely support you protecting yourself in your home.
Back to the liquor.
Yeah?
Number 4, allowing self-pour automated machines, and actually bringing it out to people's homes. Aren't the permittees liable for these people if they get too drunk and leave their premises? It used to be the bartender would cut them off, but if you have an automated machine that you could just keep pouring money into and getting drinks, where's the stop here?
Oh, were you speaking of the new like vending machines that they have?
Yeah, this on number 5 here.
That's really an interesting bill. I supported that when
Okay.
they brought it up a couple of years ago. It is highly regulated. They've done it in other states. You actually have to go show your ID, and you can't just go to the machine. I think you get like a ticket or a coupon. So you actually, there is, if you will, supervision over that. It's not like you can go to the machine and just keep buying.
I've never seen these. So.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen them, but we heard a lot. That also came up in public safety, and I was on that committee at the time. And it's actually interesting. Sometimes you think this bill is like good or bad, but you start listening to it and you say, oh, okay, well, I get it. It was more of a convenience for the bars to not have to, especially now we're looking at a huge staff crunch. Huge staff crunch. Places are closing early because they don't have staff to work in them. I got a coffee on the way here, and the line was crazy, and I got to the front, and she said, we don't have the staff. I've gone to places where they're normally open 9 or 10 o'clock and they're closing at 8. Some of them are closing earlier because they don't have the staff. So I think that that bill probably will help in those situations. But yeah, it's highly regulated, highly regulated. More so than the old cigarette machines where you used to go in and get them. Yeah,
Well, that's what I'm thinking, right? Vending
yeah, but
machine.
they are regulated. You can't just go up and buy it.
Yeah.
You have to show proof that you're legal to purchase it.
Well, I
there's
figured
a
that,
limit.
I figured you'd have to,
Yeah, and there's
At
a
least
limit.
that,
Yeah. I don't know if it's a coupon or how, I don't remember exactly how it worked, but there's regulation over that.
okay. And then on education, I noticed that item 2, ECS bonus for towns that send students to regional schools. What do you think of that?
I think so they didn't get to pass the regionalization, and so I think that's the direction.
It's like a forced regionalization.
So it gets back to the point where I mentioned earlier about money, you know, so many things are tied to money. I think that's what we're going to see going down the pike. They're very determined to get this regionalization going, and I think you're going to see that they're going to do things, incentives, where they're going to get what they want in the end, and you won't even know it happened. So at some point we will
do know because we're asking questions.
Yeah, but that is the direction that I see things when I see there's a lot of bills that come out that kind of you're going, oh, okay, where does this go?
Yeah.
So once you do that, right, you're going to be part of that, you're going to be getting the extra money. If you decide it's not working out, then you're going to have to sit there and make that decision. Oh, well, we got, an extra $5 million for doing that, or whatever it was, right? So, yes, sir.
I haven't heard too much on it, but I heard there was a bill passed that the state wants to tax the town, tax the towns that don't have like 10% low-income housing. Like some of the towns, like Judd City, has quite a bit of low-income housing, but it still doesn't reach the 10%. And towns like Plainfield, I don't know where it stands, but has that bill passed, and how many people support something like that if there is such a bill?
So there was a lot of people that did not support that. I was one of them, but I would have to read the language of some of the planning and zoning bills that did pass. I don't think that piece of it passed. Kevin, can you speak to that?
I don't think well, first of all, Plainfield, you asked the question about Plainfield, we're at 12 right now.
12.5.
Yeah, and we're working on a plan to, continue and increase, so, to fall within the guidelines of the state. As far as taxation goes, I don't think that was something we just have to make sure we're following in line with what they require. That's it.
But all these complexes bring a lot of children. Like Griswold's got 2 buildings right next to 395 where the hospital used to be, the doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
If each one has 2 kids, that's like 300 kids, and that's a new school right there, but all by itself.
Well, you have to look at what is actually being proposed. So
These are already built.
are these things, are they 2 or 3 bedroom
Yes.
groupings?
Yes.
And is that all you're looking at for income for low-income housing? Are there other properties that are looking to come in with 1 bedroom or?
Are you talking senior living?
As well.
Seniors? That would be all right.
So that's really your zoning department has to come up with what works for the best of the town.
I'm just saying, if you bring in a lot of low income from the other end of the state down to this end of the state, and they bring their children, you're going to need new schools, new high schools, new teachers, the whole works, school buses.
Most of the time, and I'll be very honest, most of the time you're not going to see someone coming from across the state to go to live up in this area. We're already in an area where we are a depressed area.
Then how many units do you need?
Well, that would depend upon how your growth is going for your town. You have a lot of things that is happening. I mean, the boom in this area is tremendous. Look at the jobs that we're looking to, have add on into each town. There is a need for housing. Take a look at what you see in the Turnpike Buyer or the newspaper about how quickly something's selling and for the price. The property values are going up quite a bit. And then from that, what can you afford? There is some smaller housing units that are low-income housing, which do help to accommodate those people in low housing ranges. So it depends. Again, it depends upon what is being brought in, how your planning and zoning is reviewing all of those, and what works best for the town. It's really it's a mix of an answer, but I'm saying that you have some that are already approved for 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom?
I believe there are at least 2.
Mhm. Are you in contact on a regular basis with your planning and zoning office?
No, not really.
It'd be a good start, because if you can get an understanding upon what they're looking to bring in and how many units are coming in and know what the impact is on the school system, that would be helpful.
Who's advising these people then? Because they're not doing it on their own.
Well, you have a town planner that helps with that. Your leadership also, I think you have Mary Florio and Killenly. I'm not sure who's your zoning down in, you're in the southern portion, so you're looking at Griswold?
Actually, I'm Lisbon.
Okay, so those would be the towns you would go to ask, to talk to their planner at that point, to find out what the numbers are. And I think Mary Ann wanted to answer some of that too.
Yeah, if I could also suggest, talk to your planning department about whether or not the town has yet adopted an affordable housing plan. Because the state already requires
That's right.
any municipality that has less than 10% of its housing stock
I'm talking.
should an applicant come in with what they call an 830G affordable housing application for the Planning and Zoning Commission. Basically, the zoning regulations wouldn't apply to that with the exception of very few, like health and safety, that type of thing. But find out if the town also has an affordable housing plan or if they're working on preparing one, because that's a new state requirement as well.
My family hasn't had school-age children. I'm mid-70s. And I've paid for so many kids to go through high school. And then every election time they come up with, oh, we're going to put them through college for free. I'm on a limited income,
Yeah.
and I can't afford all these taxes and new taxes. And somebody has to start thinking about the people and the taxpayer and the state.
Yeah, and a lot, can I continue?
Go ahead.
And a lot of misunderstanding, for lack of a better term, about affordable housing is it doesn't necessarily mean the stereotypical low-income housing. Affordable housing just means that housing is available, whether it be for rent or for purchase, that a person in the municipality can afford at a certain percentage of the average median income. I mean, I know that would I like to be able to afford a $300,000 home? I absolutely would. Does my income allow it? No, it doesn't. But keep an eye on whether or not your municipality has an affordable housing plan. And as Kevin suggested, talk to your planning department.
The thing I'm getting at is the building taxes on that building, whoever owns that building, is not going to pay enough tax to support the kids going through.
No, I get that. And
then
again,
it's spread out amongst
Yeah.
all the rest of the property
yeah,
owners.
I understand that. And again, not every affordable housing development comes in with the addition of children. For example, a senior housing or an active adult community. Plainfield has one coming up for public hearing. Those, those are restricted to seniors 55 and older.
And there's no kids in them.
No, exactly. And, I mean, things like that, it balances out for the most part.
Push your town officials to go that route
Do you think I have
with
it?
affordable housing.
What do you
I would
think?
ask another question. First of all, I love the passion, the fact that you're asking questions across the board. That means you're invested in your town, you're invested in what goes on. So that sounds great. Have you looked at a plan of conservation development from your town yet?
A while back I did, but I haven't in a
Okay.
while.
That is basically what I would use to bring to your planning and zoning. to
Couldn't
say
even
this
get
is-
in the town hall, everything's closed. How am I supposed to look at stuff?
I'm looking at it with different eyes because we've been open all the way throughout.
You
the
have,
process.
mine hasn't.
But have you been able to contact your town first select person to say, can I make an appointment to at least come in to get some of this material, or can you package it up for me?
Last time I talked to him, we got into a little argument over the town hall being closed. And him being an ex-state cop, he kind of pushes his point very loudly.
I would put this to you, if you're willing to come and talk to me about what things you'd like to talk about and get materials for, I'll be more than happy to facilitate that for you.
It would have to be another day, I've got to...
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Okay. There's a lot that goes into a lot of makeups in the town and a lot of things that are happening. One of the things I noticed through this legislative process was zoning. and how many changes they were looking to make through zoning. And while it took a while to finally strip back some of those things, there were still some things that were somewhat harmful and somewhat, let's make it change because we're having a problem down in Farmington, or we're having a problem along in the Lyme area. I didn't think that was appropriate. It really was difficult to say, because you have a complaint made in one of those towns about how they're planning and zoning regulated things, made it so that we're going to put the same rules and regulations on every single town and municipality in the state of Connecticut. And that was wrong. That was absolutely wrong. So I'm glad that they stripped back some of that stuff to take it back, to put hands-on back into our own town and municipality. So that worked somewhat.
Yeah, and so it's because of people like you who speak up. They started a 169 strong group across the state, and actually what that group did was trying to keep autonomy in each town so that you had local control. So I think the biggest argument against much of this planning and zoning was allowing you to make those decisions for your own town. You speak to Mary Ann and you ask Mary Ann, you know, she's apparently works on the committee and part of that group, and ask her, why are you doing what you're doing, and how, what is the reason for that, and then you get an explanation. If you don't like it, then you speak out, and maybe you can work together. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm getting off the subject. If you go up to the Four Corners where the light is, there's a white cross painted on the road. I found one in Griswold on the side of the road just past the River Ridge Golf Club course. There's traffic light cameras at every intersection, going all different directions, getting off the turnpike. What is all this for? And I don't want to hear traffic, watching traffic. There's something here that they're not telling, and who's watching it?
Those would be the state of Connecticut camera systems.
So
To watch for what?
I don't know. They did not contact the town municipality to say that they'd be putting one up or why.
If you look, everywhere you go, the cameras are pointing in all directions. You're going to go through one of them if you're driving a car or walking.
So what happens is they start it with, they use the reason we need to monitor traffic, we need to monitor traffic control with regard to speeding and going through lights. And they get them up, and obviously down the road they get, I say obviously because it often always happens that they get expanded in their use, and it's Big Brother watching you, right? So
right.
there's a big problem with that. They did vote again on some expansion of those cameras in the state. So that brings me to the point of, we get omnibus bills. They're called omnibus bills, or we call them aircraft carriers. They're huge, huge, huge bills that have so much in them. You get it in front of you and they might have 200 pages, 250 pages, like the cannabis bill, right? And you're on the House floor or the Senate floor and you're trying to make a decision about it, so you rely a lot on your peers. I rely a lot on the floor argument. I'm one of those ones that intently listens and to every detail so that I can understand whether it's something that I would support or not. Sometimes I don't support a bill for just a couple of reasons. It's not that the whole bill is bad, but those kinds of things, those traffic cameras were in that big transportation bill. So unless you could pick it up quickly and ask questions about that, it kind of goes unnoticed. Part of what was in that bill was requiring that everybody in the back seat get buckled in,
Right.
and making the person who's driving responsible. So if you were going out to dinner and you had a couple with you and they're sitting in the back and they didn't buckle in, and you said, hey, can you guys buckle in? I'm responsible, and they put their buckle on and then they take it off or whatever they do. The driver would be responsible for that, but people got really upset that somebody found that in the bill before it passed. And they ended up taking it out of the bill, but the problem is trying to find that stuff that you don't like and pointing it out and making an argument for it and see if you can get support that that's not what people want. But that's just one example of something that happens like that.
Down the other end of the state, correct me if I'm wrong, the state bought brand new rail cars to transport people from New Haven, Hartford, into New York City to work. Now, I read where we have a depot where we're paying people working for the state to repair these trains, we're paying to operate these trains, we're paying to buy these trains. Now, I'm in Eastern Connecticut. I'm not getting any of that.
That's right.
Have you heard, in the bus pathway where they were building special ramps for buses to pull in? Is that all
The pathway to
taken up?
nowhere.
Yeah. Is any of that ever
It's a
been
huge
discussed in the
project, it's been
legislature?
ongoing, they keep adding on to it. Those are the things that are in those big omnibus bills. But yes, that's where much of our transportation money goes to, is those sorts of things.
And I'd like to say, anybody that watches this on YouTube, if you're interested enough to watch it, why not come down here and be a part of it? And put your questions in. And I'll be quiet from here on out.
I know Kevin said no, but I want to ask you, what do you see in the trend of people coming out of the cities to the more rural areas? Because we know since COVID, people are moving out of New York, Boston. What do you see?
Well, we definitely see that, and it was driven by COVID. People wanted to get out of the city where they were kind of closed in and pushed this way. So that's part of the rise in the real estate, is that people are coming here.
Do you see a trend with these new proposals on the planning that they're proposing, you know, these?
Like planning and zoning?
Yeah.
Well, the planning.
Because it looks like they want people to go out to the rural areas with the
What?
affordable housing
Oh, I see what
plan.
you're
And
saying. Are they trying to push them out this way? Perhaps. I mean, a lot of what we heard this year had the undertone of racial justice. Everything was about racial justice in almost every single bill. And honestly, I was amazed at someone who took just things that were so benign and made them about race. And I'm thinking, how could that even, there was nothing in that bill that was specific to race, right? But this is the other thing, and I'm sure many of you have heard the CRT curriculum that they're trying to push on the schools with regard to critical race theory. That's been on national news. That's been a huge issue. It came up a few times. Many legislators are afraid to touch it because then they're accused of being racist. So it's one of those things where many people who don't agree with it, but then they're afraid to talk about it. So yeah, people are coming this way, and I think they're city folk that have been living there, that have been accustomed to many of these issues that are kind of bringing them out our way, bringing out a lot of that. But yeah, I do think that the planning and zoning could do that too. They've done it before, years ago. So yeah, we could go in that direction.
And could it be that, like our municipality's doing okay financially, cities suffering a little more, so alleviate some of the burden, maybe?
We've had that happen. We've had that happen with homeless people where they've been brought to other parts of the state where they have been because of shelters or different things. So yeah, I definitely see it. I see it in the stars, if you will. But the bigger concern is that we're losing local control, and that speaks to anything, whether it's that or anything with regard to the issues that happen in your own town. So it is going in the direction of big state government controlling all the towns.
And then the only other thing I had is I wanted to know your thoughts on the voter issues, what they're planning.
So they know that there was fraud nationally. We know that you can't say there was an election that didn't have fraud. We all know that there's fraud going on. It's how big is that fraud, right? And how do we address it? Again, trying to figure out, was it a big problem in our area, in our town, in the state of Connecticut, in any particular state? So there were many bills that came up with regard to that. I think one of the things that I'd like to see is a voter ID, and that has been, the party in majority does not want us to have voter ID. Case after case after case has been made that, with regard to having to show an ID. We show an ID for everything. Everything. You can't turn a corner without showing an ID. You have to prove your age with your birth certificate to play t-ball. I mean, there's not much you don't have to do that for, so there's much resistance with regard to that. And I think if we could get voter ID, I think that we could have a better handle on perhaps controlling that fraud. I think there are problems fraught with the absentee ballots and those sorts of things that we put in. And if you talk to the town clerks, they'll tell you it's a problem. I've talked to the Killingly and the Plainfield ones, and it's a problem. The same-day registration is a big problem. You go in and, you know, how quickly can you identify someone and have them vote that day? That's a big problem. So people voting more than once is a big problem. You have people in the colleges, they have a hometown. I just don't think we have a setup in Connecticut. Like, some states are very well equipped to handle it. I don't know if they do it technology-wise, but we are not very well set up to pick up on that. So voter fraud's a problem wherever you go. I had so many calls during the election last year when they sent out the absentee ballot applications. I got one person would say they got 3 different applications. Another one would say, I got it for somebody who moved, 10 years ago. I got it for my dead father, my, dead spouse, or over and over and over again, I heard over and over again. So you know that that's fraught with problems when you have that going on. I don't think everybody should have been sent an application. I think that all you have to do is pick up the phone and call your town hall and ask them to mail you one. That's all you have to do. And it costs a lot of money, and there's concern that they may continue that. Last year they used federal money to do that. They may use state money to continue to do that. I don't know. But it was fraught with problems, I know. I heard them from many legislators. I heard them from my own constituents.
These people broke the law that pushed this fraud. How come nobody gets charged or charged with a felony or treason? Because that's exactly what it is, taking your vote away from you.
I think that there have been some people. We have seen some people, but I think it's one thing that requires follow through, and obviously you have to, get the proof. So I think it's complicated.
How far back does the state of Connecticut keep the paper ballots before you couldn't do a forensic check of them?
That I don't know.
My town told me it was 2 years. Now, I don't know what the rest of the towns are. I don't, and they told me that a number of years ago, so I don't know what it is today.
They had people going into nursing homes with a stack of applications and reaching out to everybody in the nursing home, many of them who didn't really even know their own name, and we don't know what happened there. There was a lot of issues that came to our attention during this. We know that many, many elections just completely turned around when the absentee ballots came in. So I think there's a lot of concerns around the absentee ballots and how people have been identified, how they control the repeats and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in Connecticut on that. Yes, sir.
How do you feel about the motor vehicle department processing voter registration?
I don't think it's necessary. I think that, we seem to want to put it at every depot, and now they were talking about putting it in the housing units and requiring that they have that available there. I mean, you can actually register to vote online. You can call up and get a registration. You can go get a registration. Someone can bring you a registration. There's enough ways to get that. I've heard that many, many people who registered through the DMV had their parties even changed on them. So there's a lot of problems with a lot of those things, and I think those are things we have to look at. So
I just wanted to bring that up while we're on the topic, because my wife recently renewed her driver's license, and they changed her party affiliation to unaffiliated. Without her knowing, the registrar's office contacted us by mail, and we're correcting that. But still, if you renew your license, you shouldn't risk being kicked out of a primary.
I've heard several situations where that's happened, not just one, but several. So it's a problem. So I think that, obviously we want every United States American citizen to be able to vote. I don't think anybody on either side of the aisle doesn't want everybody to be able to vote. But we want it done legally, and we want the integrity maintained of the vote. And we want people to feel like their vote matters. I hear all the time, well, my vote doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because there's people are harvesting ballots, and people are cheating and there's fraud going on, and that's the sentiment with a lot of people. And so we want them to feel good about their vote, feel like that it counts, and feel like that that we can minimize the fraud. I don't know that you ever get, completely eliminated, but obviously we want it minimized, and I think it's a problem right now.
Thank you for taking that.
When you get a driver's license, they're all the standard color. Now, illegal immigrants and illegal immigrants, they are able to get driver's licenses. They're the same color as the ones you and I would get, being a resident in the United States, a citizen. Shouldn't, if you're non-citizen, shouldn't it be a different color or something different on that license so it doesn't look like it's a normal citizen?
I believe there's an identifier on the licenses that indicate that you're not a United States citizen. But I don't know what that is. I can check into that.
Because my mother had one, her license was taken away from her, and she got an ID and it looked like a driver's license. So, I could flash it real quick, it's a driver's license. But it wasn't, it was more of an ID.
As far as the voting go, so we're all talking about how everyone's vote counts, but if you're not registered as a Democrat or Republican and you're an independent, you're not allowed to vote in a primary. So how is your vote being counted? And why should I have to be affiliated to one party or the other in order to vote?
So every state's different, and in this state, to be able to vote in a primary, you must be a registered Republican or a Democrat in this state. It's not in every state. And an independent is a party too. So if you were registered as an unaffiliate, you can change your affiliation, I think, almost up to the day of the primary to vote in the primary. So, for example, say like you wanted to vote Democrat. I believe it, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's almost like just a couple of days before the election, you can actually go in, change your affiliation to Democrat, and then participate in the Democrat primary. Now, if you were an independent Democrat or a Republican registered, it has to be 90 days before. So, for example, we've already passed that window for the fall elections. So if there were a primary in the fall elections, you wouldn't be able to switch and participate. But that's not a federal national law, that's a state law, that's what we do here. But independent is a party, so a lot of people don't know that. So if you want to be partyless, you want to be unaffiliated. All right.
Two more questions on the voting.
Are you sure? Just two?
Just two. Convicted felons, how do you feel about them?
So the convicted felon, it's not that I don't think that a convicted felon should be able to vote. The argument is finishing their sentence, right? So if they're on parole or probation, their sentence isn't over. So the law is that you don't, listen, when you do a crime, it has to, you want to have some kind of consequences for that. And you might agree or disagree that the person can't vote, but it is a law that you can't vote if you're a convicted felon and you haven't served your time. When you're done serving that time, you can go and reapply, and there's a process that you go through. They just want to eliminate that process. And I think that there should be a process. I think you should be able to justify that you're not in trouble, haven't done anything else wrong, and then you get that privilege reinstated. Not much different, I think, than probably doing some other things where you maybe lose a driver's license or you lose your gun permit or whatever. You have to go and kind of apply. So I'm okay if you had a history of being a convicted felon and you've served your time. I'm supportive of the law that's in place. I think that
Does it need to be changed?
What's that?
It doesn't need to be changed then, you're saying?
I don't think it does.
Okay. And my other question was no excuse absentee. Can you explain that, no excuse absentee?
Yeah, I'm very torn about that. I don't think I have a feeling one way or the other. I mean,
Can you explain what it is, though?
So
I'm
no
not
excuse.
sure.
Right now in Connecticut, there's only, I think, 3 reasons why you can't vote. Have a no excuse absentee ballot. But they've changed that now, so anybody can have an excuse not to vote. But before it was, I think if you were going to be out of town, if you couldn't get there for work or if you were physically unable to go. They've changed that now and it's no excuse. So say like you just feel like you don't want to drive down to the polling place. That's going to be acceptable. It can be, you could be fearful of somebody there that might give you COVID. That was added in this past year, but now it can be for any excuse. I don't know if I have a problem with that. I want to make sure that the process is intact, that everything, the integrity of the vote is protected. So I don't know that I care why you're not there to vote as much as I do making sure that your identity is checked, making sure all those things are correct and that you're a United States citizen and that you qualify to vote. I'm more concerned about you qualifying to vote as to more than why you're not there to vote. And I don't think I have a problem with that, but I want to listen to further arguments, maybe certain reasons won't. I don't know if I really care.
And I have a question related to that. So at the bottom of page 16, that's where that starts, and then it goes on to say that if passed a resolution, and talking about 2023, so are you still in discussion about that particular item, and therefore would make some ruling by 2023?
There were some, for the voting, there were several laws. I would defer to my one of my colleagues who's ranking member on exactly what they were, but the no excuse one came up, I believe that passed. That what we kept trying to do was amend it with requiring an ID, but most of these things I think did pass. Early voting, I think early voting passed, where we were trying to get some kind of a definitive time. 30 days before, 2 months before, 6 weeks before. The argument from a lot of people were that anything could happen. So for example, if you went in September and voted, and then October you found out that the candidate you voted on got convicted of pedophilia or something. You know, that stuff often comes out towards the end. And that was one of the arguments against allowing early voting, is they felt like if we start doing that, there were things that you could learn about a candidate that you didn't know. I think we make those decisions when we go in, right? We know that could happen when we go vote. It's your choice. Up until now, and I'd have to check on this, if you sent in an absentee ballot and you changed your mind, you could actually go down to the town clerk. And because those ballots aren't opened and your name is on the outside envelope, you could actually change your ballot. The town clerk probably won't like me telling them that, but because it's a lot of work for them, and that's what happens too. A lot of it is, right? It brings a lot of work for them when we have these things, these different kinds of availability. But that was up until now. I think that's still in place. So if you put in a vote, but imagine that there were 300 people there trying to change their vote. That would not be fun for the town clerk. So but most of these change in voting happened. Most of them did take place. More leniency, making it easier. Again, I don't care so much about that as I do the integrity of the vote. Making sure that you are who you are, you're a valid United States citizen, you're only voting once. You know, those are the things that are important to me. Anybody else? Anything else, Kevin, you can think of?
Just that each and every time legislation meets and discusses and comes out to vote, I can see how difficult it is. I mean, you're talking about 24-hour sessions, sometimes even longer. You're talking about getting something put on your desk and saying you have a few hours to read through and vote on it. It makes it very difficult, and I applaud all those legislators and you in it. There's a lot there to digest. You also have some staff that try to help you out, and appreciate their work too, because it's very difficult to try to read through a 800-page piece of legislation and try to figure out all of the nuances that's going on inside of it.
I really do try to take a lot of time to make a thoughtful decision. I don't always remember why I made the vote, because there's so many votes that we take. I do take notes in my computer and they stay there for a while, so if you ask me a question I can go back and look. But I usually have thought it through. Remember, like, you know, oftentimes a bill's gonna pass one way or the other, so, bills that come to the floor are gonna pass. 99.9% of the time, if a bill comes to the floor, the majority party knows they have the votes. It's not coming out if it doesn't have votes, so the likelihood of squashing it there is very difficult. What we do often, though, is amend bills, and we try to do that and make some of the bills that perhaps it was fraught with many issues, and we try to change some of that. And sometimes we get that done, not always, but sometimes, so we can make, I don't want to say a bad bill, but a bad bill better. So we can do that. The other thing that oftentimes legislators will do is let the other side know that we're going to talk this bill for a very long time if you push it. You want to push this bill, okay, but we're going to keep you here for 10, 12, 15 hours, sometimes 24, and we can continue to talk the bill. And they don't want to be there that long. So you'll get people who will say, okay, you know, what do you want? We had that happen with the medical freedom choice. They didn't want to talk it anymore. They weren't going to accept any of the amendments. We had about 100 amendments in on that bill. I worked on it with Senator Summers, about 100. And we were up all weekend working on amendments to make that bill better. The one that they did accept was allowing that your religious exemption followed the child. And we conceded to let that get passed, because they weren't going to pass any of the amendments, to stop talking about the bill. So that you'll see happen too. There's a lot of things that go on, but I oftentimes, you know, will be one of a few that votes no on a bill, even though I know it's going to pass, but it also triggers you guys to ask me questions. Well, why did you vote no on that? These are my concerns. It wasn't really a matter of whether my vote was going to make it pass or not pass. They had the votes to pass it. But I also try to stand by the principles of limited government. I believe that every individual, I believe and know that I represent each person's individual freedom, individual choices. And that also goes to your town and your opportunity to make choices as a community. What you do at your schools in Plainfield might not be what Killingly does or what Canterbury does, but everybody has a different group of citizens. And you stay active in your town and you become a part of that and an integral part of making those decisions that are right for you and your children and your families. And I believe that all of you have that right to do that. And that's what government was founded on. Government wasn't founded over ruling over you and making a bunch of laws. We were founded to represent you. My job is to represent your freedom and to keep government out of your life, not in your life. And I take that really, really, really seriously. And so, you know, I don't always get it right. Sometimes I look back and I go, oh, I probably should have voted differently on that bill. I might find something out afterwards and I'm like, oh, wished I hadn't done that. But again, sometimes we're working in split seconds. We're trying to make a decision. You're trying to get information and understand what you're voting on. And I am not perfect. I have made mistakes. But hearing from you is helpful. Hearing how it impacts your life. The religious exemption was a big one. There were many, many, many parents that came to me and said, you know, my older daughter had a vaccine injury and I don't want my younger child vaccinated. And they've made those personal decisions and those are for them and their family. And they wanted that ability to make those decisions. They don't want the government interfering in that. And I agreed with that. So hearing from you and talking it out is really important to me. So I appreciate if you've reached out. Sometimes, the other thing about communication is sometimes things go straight to our aides, and my aide is supposed to blind copy and send it back through me so I see that he's sent it if you've sent it to me. It happens about half the time. So if you didn't get a response, I apologize. My phone number, my own cell phone number is everywhere. It's on my Facebook page. If I give you a card, I'll put it on there. I try to make myself available. And again, I apologize if you didn't hear from me. Sometimes I do miss them, but I try to let you know. But that's my job. My job is to represent you in Hartford. My job isn't to go up there and beg for more laws, regulation, and government control over you and our towns. My job is to protect you from that and keep you free from that. So that's that's what I believe, and I take it very seriously. And I'm happy to have a conversation with any of you at any time. I try to make myself really available. I try to go to events so that I'm there. If you see me, come up to me, introduce yourself. I would like to talk to you about this issue. Okay, let's make an appointment. I really enjoy going out locally and seeing everybody. I think Plainfield has done an amazing job the last couple of years. I mean, with everything that happened, that event was amazing. So thank you, Kevin, for all of your hard work. I do appreciate all that you've done. I mean, it's crazy. All through all of this really difficult time, the things he's been able to push through. I've been in his office many times. He's called me. We've talked. I know he talks to Senator Summers and Representative Lanoue.